Doctor Strange to a mini Avengers film. Maybe the biggest film we've seen in quite some time since Endgame. Next up, I'm just the talk. So let's talk about it. And welcome to the Flicks, Picks, and the Nitpicks. And I am your humble host, Snow, because I'm amazing. And I'd like to invite you to Just the Talk, where we could just talk movie news, movie speculations, and just have fun and go off the cuff, where I can just present to you my commentary on what's going on and what's trending in movie talk right now. And this one is going to be dedicated to the film that, let's be for real, we did not expect this until as time went on and we talked more and more about it, how big this Doctor Strange film is going to be. It's going to do for Doctor Strange what Civil War did for Captain America. Though I like to think by Avengers we were already on the Captain America train. And to be quite honest, it was Winter Soldier 2. I always told people Captain America 1 was an excellent film that a lot of people need to take care and pay attention to. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the director of The Rocketeer had something to do with it, which very much sits well in the aesthetic of how they shot that film. And I love the first Captain America, and the Captain America trilogy, if you ask me, is probably the strongest out of all the characters. To be quite honest now, I will have to admit, Spider-Man might be the best one in terms of, the part 3 was just so amazing, but I would argue that Captain America might have had the best trilogy. If not Captain America, definitely Spider-Man. Hell no to Iron Man. Iron Man fell off on 3. A lot of people shit on 2. I love 2. I was not a big fan of 3. 3 was just a different movie to me. It was very Disney, and if I'm not mistaken, that's when Disney really took over the film studios, if I'm not mistaken. So, that being said, Doctor Strange, his character, even though people did not expect it to, especially if you see his dynamic with Peter Parker, he could very well be the next Iron Man. Down to the mustache, the attitude, a guy that used to be arrogant in his core, but now is humbled by being a hero, realizing and really kind of like getting to the core of himself. He is just like Iron Man. Tony Stark's very similar parallels. They just express it slightly different, but very similar parallels in how they were presented to the public. And his relationship with Peter Parker, although not exactly the same, his is more out of reluctance. He's more like Mr. Wilson to Dennis. You know, I hate this kid, these young whippersnappers, but I can't lie, I kind of fuck with him. You know what I mean? That's his relationship with Peter Parker. And I really find that dynamic something that even though it's missing since Tony Stark passed, we kind of got shades of a compensatory variation of that. And I think it was satisfying to see on screen. And it was very natural, because even when he met him, he's like, "Who's this, your ward?" I love that dynamic between Doctor Strange and Spidey. And even how Spider-Man kind of evolved out of a sincere mistake that he did exercise all other avenues before he saw Stephen Strange. You know what I mean? Like, just even that bounce back and forth about how simplistic that the answer was right in front of you to at least exercise before you came to a wizard. But needless here nor there, you could see the beautiful build up that they did with Stephen Strange and personality to get him to this point where he can have the biggest second film with such a monster cast of cameos, and this is a perfect way to kind of end cap all the other franchises that they now own, that's all underneath their environment, that they could kind of play with and do offshoots of other different variations. Because even in the comics, there's not just Spider-Man, there's Web of Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and even though they're all kind of the same, they're all kind of telling their own stories in a different way. So if you're a reader, you might, there's certain aspects of the character that might more ring well with you. Like when I used to read the comics, I used to hate that I had to jump from Web of Spider-Man to Spectacular, because sometimes they'll do the crossovers and other, you know what I mean, because there's so many comics, and I was a broke little dude. I couldn't afford all of them, you feel me? Like, you're doing too much, Marvel. So that's how it was back in the day, you dig? So now to see that Stephen Strange has this beautiful opportunity to really present exactly how powerful, how dynamic, and how interesting a character he could be is just, to me, very amazing. I've read him in comic books, but I never read a Stephen Strange, a Doctor Strange comic. You know, he popped up in the comics that I liked. He popped up with characters that I enjoyed. I've always was familiar with him. He just wasn't my guy. I mean, like I said, there's no secret here. I'm a Spider-Man dude. You know what I mean? Since I was a little boy. Don't get it twisted. Batman is a big character to me too. You would think, knowing my personality and type of characters that I draw, you would almost assume that a darker character like like Batman would be more in line with me and how I come up. Because growing up with ninjas and all of this shit like a kid, you know what I mean? That's my shit. That's my jam. And I remember when I was a kid, I kind of drew Spider-Man as a ninja. I thought Spider-Man would have been a dope ninja, but anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the thing that we geek about, and we have so much fun discussing. The character, though, that I normally cling to, but you know what I mean, we're always more darker. But at the same time, for Spider-Man to be technically a lighter character, but he was mature when I was young reading him. I didn't read books when he was a child and all innocent. You know, we knew that of him in his backstory, but he was so much more. This is a man after the fact that had battles, had years, and that's how I came into reading Spider-Man. He was a middle-aged man, grown man, but still he was a lighter character than most, but he dealt with a lot of dark stories that I actually enjoyed, from the Clone Saga to the death of Aunt May, even when Mary Jane got pregnant. So it's just so much it's just so much, especially with the Clone Saga. So these are my guys, but for a guy that enjoys all of that, the appeal that they're doing with Doctor Strange, and obviously we know what it is. It's the hotspots of so many different characters coming into it. It's going to make it very interesting. What I do hope is that they focus on this being Doctor Strange's story and his narrative and his storyline. And the fact that they're bringing in America Chavez, that's going to be very interesting. It's going to be, I wonder if they're going to treat her more sci-fi like or very fantastical, because if you know America Chavez's character, you're going to have to explain that, especially if you're going to go out of your way. And I'm going to do a deeper dive into America Chavez, because I kind of hope that they handle her character with a lot more sincerity and more sci-fi-esque tropes, as opposed to focusing on, you know, representation and all that bullshit. Because when you over focus on it and forget that you have a narrative, you could lose the explanation, because you're so trying to explain feelings and all these other political attributes that you've neglected to explain. How does that work in the world that you've already just set up? Or even how does that world operate where she could legitimately have two mothers? Like, you could do something very fascinating with her character. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not going to go too in depth with her in the books because I don't know enough, but I will go off the cuff. That's what Just the Talk is about, where I could just talk. We could just shoot the shit. I'll let you know when I'm looking stuff up and when I'm reading articles, but I could just go off the cuff so we can at least speak to each other honestly and very earnestly about where we're coming from, so that when we start to notate where we're pulling out like concrete information to bounce off of, then we can make the proper edifications with respect and with some level of adulthood that we find seldom less shared within this YouTube and fandom space, you know? So that being said, I really do find that them pushing this is going to be an amazing feat. I look forward to seeing what they decide to do with America Chavez, her character, and where they're built up from. I'm also interested in, again, how they are going to design her character's history. Again, she's from another dimension, and she punches through shit with basically the star shape. I hope they kind of play off the stars and make it a little bit more geometric in line quality and how they design it, so it could fit a little bit more like a pentagram, but so it fits more in sync with how Doctor Strange utilizes his powers with all the geometric shapes and stuff like that. So at least you could find some sort of symbiotic relationship in how she uses it across different types of dimensions, you know, and how they design that is going to kind of show the marriage between all these different like variant universes. So when she crosses over, it makes a lot more sense. Also, the fact that she has two parents, two mothers. How does that operate? How does that work? Like, they're still human beings, so they gotta have an XY chromosome. And not to say that we gotta spend too much time analyzing it, but if you want to translate that to reality and how that can actually work, that could be fascinating. You could kind of play off old episodes of Outer Limits and a village full of women and how that worked when it was like the one surviving guy and why that happened and all the men died out from a weird disease. So it wasn't that they didn't give birth to boys anymore. Boys didn't live past a certain age of infancy. The girls had survived. And they also showed what man introduced, just his presence in an all-female society, and how just him existing and his mentality of how he approached decision making and conflict resolution via, you know, ultramatismo. And this is where you can actually use this will make sense via toxic masculine traits of overutilized aggression. He infected a population of women to start warring amongst themselves, because he felt like instead of acting and doing something a little bit more diplomatic for this civilization of women, on this civilization towards this civilization of women, he felt like we should applaud aggression and just take it. If they're not going to give it, take it. Let's war. It was such an ingenious idea what they did with Outer Limits, that you could kind of parlay that into a America Chavez film and make it very sci-fi, very, that's the approach I would have went, very Outer Limits, but really deal with the science of it, how it works, the social things, if you want to play with a little bit of that. Because I think that if you are honest with it from that aspect, you could argue a lot of strong points without having to do too much. Now, there's going to be people that's going to run away with it. Again, you have those segments, but by leaving it there on the table, but focusing on the science part, you could deal with that a little bit later on how that works in America Chavez world. And even on a trilogy sense, you could actually show what would happen if they put a man on her planet in her dimension, and maybe even do something that people would not expect. Maybe the guy is a lot more, he employs a lot more of our most noblest of attributes. if you want to play that game and go a direction that no one would ever expect to go, while also keeping in line that idea of what men can do in a world full of women. It could be very interesting. But again, we'll get real in depth on that, because I feel like we could do a whole joint breakdown of America Chavez and how they could present her on screen for the first time in her world and all of that. And I'm going to do one just on that. But let's just stay on point with Doctor Strange. And see, at the same time, I still want Doctor Strange to be the focus. I do want them to actually also play with this that romance thing. They said this was supposed to be scary. Again, you have so much going on, and that's my worry. It's supposed to be the scariest one, but yet we have all these different dimensional characters that we have to explain while introducing so much new one that the writing would have to be top notch to be able to execute all these different facets that you're trying to present for the first time to the cinematic universe. That you have to be very careful when trying to express it, because you're not going to be able to express the thing that you initially said that this was going to be. The horror version of the universe, whereas it's starting to sound more and more like you're using a horror director to shoot something that is going to be more. And this is where I'm not sure the direction. I don't know if they're going to lean into more sci-fi tech, or they're going to lean more into the fantasy element. And even if you either or you do, how are you going to present that in a very scary way to draw fear? And I think there's a way to do it when you're dealing with different dimensions and how you want to present it. But then the story has to be more intense, bigger. This film has to be about 3 hours long. I would hope, if you're trying to make sure to maintain a level of fear while also explaining a lot of these characters, while giving you a nice pace and allowing for all these other characters to share the screen time, and also bring in, if not the horror, definitely present this more like a thriller. And I would love for them to present this more like a thriller. And I think it's possible they can, but again, I want the story to be there. I want it to be well executed, well designed, and well formulated so that the layman can really get pulled into this story, while also employing all the things that guys like me that get geeked up over these comic books, that we could find a lot of Easter eggs in it that makes you feel like, dag man, this is the comic book to life. But that's all I got for it, man. Let me know in the comments below how you guys feel about it. What are you expecting? We're definitely gonna get look out for a whole thing on just America Chavez, because I think that's gonna be an excellent video that we could really do some like quality discussions on, and also present what I was gonna tell you, the Outer Limits version, where it's a world without men, and how you can merge that into this world. I think it could be awesome. It could be excellent. And especially if you're going to skew America Chavez younger, it could be a beautiful way. If you want to employ all these other isms and shit and social politics to present in a more earnest way, without having to overly beat someone in the head to feel a way about anything. Like, there's a way we can present this as a film, and it's the character, but tweak it enough for reality that it can translate itself very well to the screen. But let me know in the comments below how you feel about this. Like, share, subscribe. See you next time. And as always, out of that outro. Chill.